the recording. So yeah, welcome again and welcome to this end of project. So we're running it, as I was saying, quite in a small committee just due to the COVID circumstances. There's been a lot of sort of ups and downs since essentially the South African team finished, and us on the UK side, we managed to move the grant and sort of finished a couple of bits and pieces, including actually dealing with a lot of finance issues, which I'll mention quickly afterwards. But essentially, I think we're really getting close to having completed everything, even though we still have actually a lot of ongoing activities linked to this project, but also other activities. So we decided really to run this project in a way where we had everybody from the advisory group here. We had apologies from the RTPI. Andrew is in another meeting, has been called in another meeting. So Stuart, David and I are going to meet with him in January and also meet with one of his colleagues who's kind of dealing with the research side at the RTPI. We also have apologies from Riette, who's again has been called on an urgent project meeting. So she's not here today. And we have a couple of colleagues who are going to join afterwards. What and how we're going to run the day is we essentially going to start by maybe talking quite a lot just to sort of present to you where we are, what we've been doing, the kind of the result. I mean, that's one of the good things maybe with Zoom is it's actually the first time where all the South African colleagues can also join this meeting, which is great. I think, again, that's something we wanted to do physically and we hadn't been able to. And this time, essentially, everyone is here, which is really good. And thank you again for all the members of the advisory group. We're waiting for a couple of others, but we'll see who comes in. And as soon as they arrive, essentially, we'll just ask everyone to present themselves if they haven't done so. I'm just going to move with the PowerPoint that Stuart and I have prepared just to give you a sort of idea of how we're going to run this morning. And hopefully this is going to work. Yes. All right. Everybody see the PowerPoint? Good. All right. So as I said, yeah, welcome again. I think when we started designing this PowerPoint, we were thinking about what would summarize this project. I think there's a lot of things that could summarize this project. I mean, from all the research we did doing, but also from all the meetings and discussions we had during those basically 3 years. So I think, and again, we'll come back to this afterwards, but it's been a great, not only research experience, but also human experience. We'll say much more of all this afterwards. Before getting into a roundtable and allowing everyone essentially to just say a few words, we have an announcement to make. So congratulations to Lorena. I can't see her on the screen. Let me just scroll down so I can see her face. Where is she? So Lorena, yeah. I can't still see her. Yes, no, I have her. It's much better to see you smiling when I actually announce this. So yeah, congratulations to Lorena. So it's just basically very new from a couple of days ago, but Lorena has just been offered essentially a tenured position at the University of Lund in Sweden. So I don't know if you want just to say a few words about this.
Yes, so yes, it's been a very long process and a lot of ups and downs to decide what to do in life. But I think working with this project was essential actually to get this position because it is in human geography, but they have a new course now in planning. So they're organizing a new course in planning. So I think they found it super interesting that I was working with planning education and then I'll start in June. So I'm super excited. I will not have to move again, countries and cities and everything. So I'm, yeah, thrilled.
So yeah, I think the idea is, I mean, huge congratulations to Lorena, and I think as a team as well, I mean, we're just very proud because I mean, Lorena has been essentially, I mean, the one here from the start, and I think she left the project, she moved to Sweden, and then it was a matter of her getting a job, because I remember almost our first discussion from the start was, what do you need on your CV now for the next step? So yeah, very proud of her, and I think that's a great outcome for the project as well.
Thank you.
So before essentially we just really start talking about the research, what I want to do, oops, what's happening? Yes, what I want to do is essentially do a sort of virtual roundtable. So I think I picked up this picture just to reflect the sort of the frustration of not being able to see you. So we're just imagining that we all here around this table and having a cup of coffee and essentially discussing this research. I'm going probably to start from the top of my screen, just to allow everyone to say who they are. And then, I don't know, Stuart, can you monitor if we have anyone coming in afterwards that hasn't said who they are at the start?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so I mean, Cliff, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I'm Cliff Haig. I'm based in Edinburgh. I'm a retired, semi-retired academic, and I'm a member of the advisory board.
Thank you, Cliff. Stuart?
Hi, I'm Stuart Stevens, a lecturer in planning at South Africa, and I'm the South African PI on the project.
Paul?
Good morning, I'm Paul Watson. I've practiced in local government for about 30 years now, private consultant, occasional lecturer through, believe it or not, connections in Colombia, in Medellin. Former external examiner at Birmingham, which is how Mike wrote me into this. I'm looking forward to this morning.
Thank you, Paul. Lorna, you again?
Yeah, so I was the UK side postdoc in the research, and I think I'm lucky enough to have met all of you at some point, so yes.
Elsana? Oh.
Hi, good morning. Morning this time. My name is Elsana van Eijsten. I work with the CSIR, which is a research council in South Africa. Also a lecturer part-time. And yeah, so currently running a big capacity development project actually for Anglo-American across municipalities in South Africa. So I've been part of the sort of, I think, joining the project at a later stage, but really, yeah, enjoyed it and learned a lot and got a lot of value out of it. Yeah, so looking forward to today.
Thank you. Clive?
Hi, everybody. I'm Clive Harridge. I'm the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Association of Planners and a member of the advisory board.
Thank you.
Oh, I should say I'm based here in the UK. I'm based in the UK.
Martin?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Martin Lewis from the South African Council for Planners, SAPER. I'm the CEO at SAPER. And I've been involved in this project since before COVID.
From the start. Phil?
Hi everyone, I'm Phil Jones. I'm one of the co-Is on the UK side based at the University of Birmingham, looking after kind of the tech side and some things about cultural theory as well.
Joe?
Hi everyone, I'm Johanna Waters and I'm a Professor of Human Geography at University College London, and what else? I co-direct the Migration Research Unit there. I work on international education and migration amongst other things, and yeah, it's been a privilege to be part of the advisory board of the project.
Thank you. Pat?
Hi, I'm Pat Knox-Solo. I'm a senior lecturer in human geography at University of Birmingham, and I'm on the advisory board.
David?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see everyone again. My name is Dave Adams. I'm a lecturer in planning at Birmingham, and I helped out on the UK data collection side, and I've been involved, I think, from the start. Although there's a few things have happened along the way, but it's good to be back involved.
Yeah, David initially joined as Birmingham City University, and then in the middle we recruited it at the University of Birmingham once. I mean, when he was still there, when I was still there. I think. Okay, yeah, Mike.
Just remember to unmute myself because I usually start talking when I'm still muted. So yeah, my name is Mike Beasley. I'm from the University of Birmingham, part of the team. I was more involved in the early days, certainly in helping to set up the project. So it's very nice to be here at the end just to see what's happened with the project and what we've actually learned. So it's been a very interesting project, and I was lucky enough to be part of the initial visit out to South Africa as well. That was a really a very interesting and insightful trip. So yes, very pleased to be part of the project, and as I say, looking forward to today.
Thank you. And we have also, and that's good because we don't know you. I mean, not the team. The team, most of the team don't know you yet. Olaf Yang from CAP Young Planners. Oh, we don't see.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Olaf Yang, and I'm the chair for the Commonwealth Association of Planners, the Young Planners Network. It's nice to see everyone.
And it's great to have you. I mean, you will see that this is some of the things we started engaging a bit further is with the CAP Young Planners Network in the UK and in South Africa as well. And in that respect, Christine as well from the Women in Planning, the CAP Women in Planning representative, she sent her apologies, but she's based in Vancouver, so it's basically the middle of the night for her. So she said, I mean, we've been in touch, and she's looking forward to hear some of the outcomes of the project as well. I'm just wondering, before we make a start, if there's any questions or anything. I just received an email from Ruve, who is obliging because she has issues with her internet connection. So I think the idea is maybe Lorena will run the presentation if she doesn't manage to come in. I don't know, Lorena, if you have a way to text her, just to tell her not to worry. And if she manages essentially to find internet, she needs, she comes in, and it's not informal, but essentially there's no pressure on her joining late. So if she can get a better internet connection, really tell her to join. Good. I'm just checking. I don't think I have, this screen is just, I'm never going to get used to Zoom. I think everybody said who they were. I didn't forget anyone. I'm just checking. No, I think it's fine. Stuart, can you confirm?
Yeah, I think everyone's presented.
Okay.
Apologies if I got that wrong, but yeah, from what I can see, everyone looks like
excellent. I think we were supposed to have someone from the Commonwealth Association of Universities as well, so he's not there yet. So we'll see if he joins later. But anyway, so again, welcome everyone, and I think it's great to see you. What I'm going to do is just to sort of explain how we're going to run this morning. As I said, it's going to be a lot based on what we've learned, and also giving a lot of space for you guys from the advisory group as well to hear from the South African colleagues. I'm going to start by giving a very sort of quick and quite high level overview of what was the project, what we did, where we moved essentially along the journey. Then essentially we thought it was very important to give a voice right away to our sort of young early careers essentially members, and especially here Lorena and Ruve, so both from the UK and the South African teams, because both of them were essentially highly involved in the data collection and in the data analysis. We're missing Mishka as well here, who sent her apologies. But we're going to start by them reflecting really on this journey after me giving you an overview of this. Then we'll move essentially on what our two UK colleagues thought about this SAPER project. So David and Phil will sort of pick up on some of the research areas they've been involved in, just reflecting again on what they learn and essentially what the project essentially and how the project informed the wider academic debates. At that time, what we're thinking of doing is have a session of Q&A and discussion. I mean, really feel free to drop any questions or even write the question if you have to. The way we're going to run this is Stuart is going to monitor any questions happening on the screen, and we can pick this up, and then we'll just essentially reverse this in block 2. I will monitor the question. So hopefully we'll be able to pick up everything. But nevertheless, this idea is during this block of Q&A, we'll be able really to hand over and just debate everything we've been discussing. So that's really the idea. We can also see at that point if we need to do proper sort of 5 minutes break or not, but we'll see how it goes. Then essentially on block 2, so here we really want to push more towards what we learn in terms of South African planning education in practice. And this one, from our perspective in Stewart, it was very important for you, for the members of the advisory group, really to hear from the South African colleagues. So Stewart, Elsona, Martin, and Verna will talk about some of the key results that appeared out of this project. We will be also mentioning and discussing what came out of the South African end of project, because I will mention this, but essentially in South Africa, the project ended earlier than ours because we got extensions on our side. And they will essentially really pick up what came out and essentially the way forward when we need and when we're starting to reflect around planning education, what planners need in South Africa. And finally, really, we want to spend some time sort of really debating and discussing the future research areas. There's loads, essentially, and we have actually started exploring a range of opportunities. We can show that there's much more to come, and I mean, ongoing discussion, especially with Christine, for example, just demonstrate how strong the link is with CAP. So we really think that, especially on that side, there's much more that is going to happen in the future. But nevertheless, I mean, we'll just pick this up and really discuss with you what you feel and any sort of feedback you may have for the project, but also for further research activities. All right, so this is really up to me to give you this sort of very higher level of what we achieved. And I'm going to try not to talk for very long. It's actually quite a hard task to summarize a 30-month project in such short period of time. So it's going to be quite high level in the sense that some of the issues I'm going to mention will be picked up afterwards from colleagues. But essentially, hopefully you can get a sense of where we started, what we did, what we achieved, and essentially really the sort of the research trajectory and also policy practice trajectory out of this SAPER project. So I think, I mean, it kind of reflects in a way on this first welcome slide when we had these pictures of a lot of urban and planning features that we research in South Africa, but also all these pictures of us as a team. And I want to really to emphasize here that it's been an amazing, not only scientific, but also human journey. And I think as researchers, we have different range of projects. I mean, we have projects where we deliver, we write papers, we have data, but essentially in terms of the team per se, there's probably no real connection. I mean, we're not really happy to see each other. And I think with this project, I think we didn't know each other really when we started. The project was initially built with another South African colleague who actually left afterward and Stewart took over. And what is clear is out of this collaboration, I mean, there's been essentially friendship developed, and essentially it's been a team that really worked super well. And it's clear that it's not essentially an end of a journey in the sense that we have still loads to do. And we feel that essentially the connection that has been developed throughout SAPER is something which is going essentially to lead to many other collaboration in the future. So this is really important because, I mean, having been involved in different research projects, this is not something we can say about other projects, but I think this one, a lot of the colleagues will probably concur that as a team, and I really mean UK and South African team, we work very well. I think I mean, I shouldn't say we had fun when we were in the field in both countries, but essentially really enjoyed discussing and seeing things. And this was really the case both when we went to South Africa and also when the UK team came to the UK twice. So there's been a lot of changes in the team. So as I mentioned already, I mean, we had a change in leadership with Stewart really taking over after 6 months. And it's been a fantastic addition, essentially. And this leadership by Stewart has been absolutely brilliant. And it was great, essentially, to have this project moving forward with Stewart. And especially because I think it's something we should never forget is Stewart was still finishing his PhD at the same time and lecturing full time. So he's been basically handled this project and just doing everything else on the top. So, I mean, thank you for this, because as the other PI on the other side, I mean, it was really brilliant to have you by my side. We had new additions also in the team, and especially Elsona, for example, joined. And again, I mean, a fantastic addition to all the discussion we've been having. We had quite a lot of curious moves. So as I said, I mean, the first one was David, who moved from BCU to UOB. I think after the second probably career move was me from UOB to UCL. In between, we had Lorena, who moved to Malmö. And now she's moved to Lund. I don't think we had a lot of careers move on the South African side, Stewart.
Yeah, I think the one we had was Mishka, not so much of a move, but she went from being a PhD student to being a lecturer. So
yeah,
one job appointment on that side.
exactly. And I mean, that was more sort of a comment, but we didn't get any babies, but we had actually 2 weddings through the duration of the project. So Stuart got married, Mishka got married. So I think it just demonstrates again, I mean, this sort of, in a way, personal relationship that we're all aware of. So yeah, it's been a great sort of human journey for this. What I would like also to say that this is a project which we don't have worked with our partners. And here it's, of course, SACPlan has been there from the beginning. I mean, Martin has been here as a researcher in the team, but also as the head of SACPlan. He did, I mean, an amazing job in supporting the project from the start. We have CAP as well, which has been our really sort of core key partners, with Clive being always there advising and giving us advice, putting us in touch. He invited Stuart and I to the CAP meeting in Cape Town 2 years ago. So, I mean, it's been brilliant to have those partners. And I mean, hopefully this, as I said before, it's not the end of the collaboration, it's just the beginning for new things. And also, of course, we had the RTPI with Andrew Close, who's been really here again for us, and especially helping with the data collection in the UK. So again, Andrew really sent his sincere apologies for today, but as he said, it's really, again, something that they want to continue picking up. So we'll have this follow-up meeting with them and we'll just take it from there. So essentially, it's been really a project where, I mean, the partners have been there from the start, and they have really sort of carried forward the research along with our academic partners in the advisory group and also all the colleagues in the project. So for this, I think, again, it's been a successful project in that respect. In terms of the setbacks and the adjustments, so, I mean, there's been quite a lot. I mean, the big one, obviously, is COVID-19, with the frustration today of us not being there. With also, and this is also one of the reasons why we decided to keep it a bit small here, I mean, for us in academia, I mean, COVID, and this is the case in the UK as really in South Africa, really sort of double or triple our workload. Just to be, I think that's probably quite true for everyone. So I think we've been juggling for almost now 10 months. It's been a very difficult period for everyone. And I mean, well done for everyone for still keeping and writing and drawing their last final bits, essentially, for this project, because it's been hard for everyone. We had a couple of other setbacks, and especially this was essentially linked to my move from UAB to UCL, where, and this explained the second extension we had on the UK side, because basically the transfer of the project took 6 months, where all the finances essentially were blocked. We had quite a couple of drawbacks as well with some key bills, and especially a big one to SACPlan, which wasn't paid by Birmingham, whereas it was supposed to. So again, I think this was a massive setback. Hopefully now everything is sorted out. Essentially, I have a week now to spend the last bits of money, but we're more or less essentially here in that respect. But this was essentially a big setback in the sense that, we have the cat. It was a big setback in the sense that the finance issue really pushed up backwards, and I was at one point very worried about the activities we were doing with SACPlan, but hopefully this is sorted now. So this is where we are, and essentially, even though we were initially running for 30 months, we actually run for more due to those extensions we had on the UK side. I mean, in South Africa, essentially, they were not keen to give any extensions, so they finished early on, even though essentially we kept working since then. What I want really now to do is kind of come back on what initially we said we were going to do. And this also will allow me to sort of summarize a bit what we did, how we moved and tweaked things to adapt essentially to various sort of academic and policy contexts. And also then we'll move essentially really to show you what we achieved. So when we designed this project, it was really a Newton call linked to education, higher education. And one of the key goals, and I'm probably not going to read everything, but it was really to investigate the social and the economic value of planning education. So this is really something we've been really pushing and looking at what is behind planning in terms of values, but also we've been digging into the evolution of the planning profession in South Africa. So I would say in that respect, it's been really a tick box, and we've managed really to get into the data, also to identify and analyze how the profession evolved in terms of, I mean, ethnic background, diversity, and all those kind of things. The objective too was really to deconstruct the curriculum, and especially here in line with the changing post-colonial context. So this one is probably one of the objectives that we had to tweak a bit, and especially in link to a lot of issues that happened at the start of the project, and a lot of the research that were essentially conducted by other colleagues in South Africa and UCT. So this, we kept it essentially as an underlying issue, but really we shifted a bit the idea of really understanding and deconstructing the curriculum in regards to what planners need once they start working. So we essentially widened this idea beyond essentially the post-colonial aspect of the project, and we really essentially focus on trying to learn and trying to analyze what planners, essentially what kind of skills they needed once they were working on planners. And we actually had, in that respect, a huge focus on the young planners especially. We did reflect on what was the implication for the internationalization of planning education. And this is really one of the work David was leading on, where we did some research with UK academics to really reflect and analyze what was the impact on planning education in the UK, and especially on the internationalization of the planning curriculum. Initially, really here, we wanted to try to focus on more African and South African scholars and students. We didn't actually manage to find a lot. So we widened a bit our sample, and we really talk with UK academics and also planning practitioners. Again, we'll pick this up later, and David will be able to pick up on this. The other thing as well, which we did, was to create a platform of ID sharings between South African academics, professional and students. We did this essentially in 2 steps. We had what we call a teaching platform, where essentially we managed to bring students from the UK and South Africa together and to work essentially on comparative online projects. So this is something we run essentially at the start of the project. And now really we're working with SACPlan to create this big, huge platform of mentoring and ID sharing through essentially SACPlan. So this was the one which had been delayed just because of not having a bill paid, but it's essentially happening, and this is essentially happening. And I'm also conscious that this links very nicely with what Olafieng is doing with the Young Planners CAP network. So we'll pick this up afterwards, because there's a lot of connections with other initiatives happening through CAP especially. And finally, really the last objective, where I feel we brought actually a lot, and you will hear about this at a later stage, is this idea of developing a set of evidence-based research for higher education planning strategies. So in this respect, we produce a range of materials available on the website, from videos, from briefing notes, but also what we did is we actually engaged with other research initiatives in Africa and in other countries to essentially generate wider recommendation across the Global South per se. Again, our pinpoint, essentially what we achieved today is not to talk too long. So essentially, when we reflect on this objective, I think the idea is, I mean, we addressed and we met all the objectives. We had essentially to tweak them a little bit. And I think this is part of an iterative research journey, where we start by having ideas. And then essentially when we contrast with what's happening in the field, we realize that essentially things need to move on a little bit. But having said that, really, we met essentially everything that we said we will do. In terms really of sort of bringing a lot of sort of the quant and some of the numbers, recently, I mean, Stuart and I had been asked by the Newton Fund to produce a short report. And one of the questions that make us actually smile a lot is they wanted essentially figures, just to say essentially, oh, through the project, I don't know, 5,000 people have been, for example, vaccinated or something like this. And we were saying, yeah, it's been difficult to find those kind of figures essentially for us. But nevertheless, I think we did quite a lot, because it's a social sciences project, and we actually managed to generate a very big, massive database. So just as a reminder in that respect, in 2017, so the first really step of the data collection was a survey with 219 planning practitioners. So we run this through SACPlan, through SAPE, and for a range of different networks. And there's been a couple of papers published out of that. In addition, and this is really thanks to, the massive amount of work Lorena Rouvet and also Mishka has been doing, but we undertook 89 interviews with South African planners across the country. So this was a massive, essentially, work of data collection with, Lorena and Rouvet on the road, driving all across the country. So, we can't, I think both Stuart and I just can't be enough grateful for both of you for doing that, because it was fantastic. And we managed really to have a very diverse sample of planners in terms, again, of gender, in terms of where they were at the stage of their careers, in terms of ethnicity. So we really managed to have a very solid sample of the view of South African planners across the country. What we did in line with the work in the UK, we interviewed, and again, it was Lorena mainly and David. So both of them, essentially, they interviewed 13 planning educators, so essentially lecturers really in the UK. And on top of this, we did also an online survey where we asked essentially really planners, mainly in the UK, but also some of them in other European countries, to really think and reflect around the issue of planning education in the UK. So the sample here, when you look at it, looks smaller, but it's important to mention that the Newton Fund is not essentially linked to doing any research in the UK. So it was essentially a small addition that we could do, but we couldn't essentially work on a large scale sample through that, because that wasn't why we got the money. Anyhow, again, and David will mention this afterwards, we got some very interesting insights out of the survey and out of the interviews. A paper was published in Town Plan and Review in that respect. And finally, it's worth mentioning that we also supported the data collection of 4 PhDs, which is actually quite big. So we had Rouvet, we had Mishka, we had Martin as well, and Stuart. So quite a lot essentially of research that occurred through SAPER, which again, I think is quite impressive. And it just demonstrates, going back on what I was saying early on the fact that it's not the end, it's still the beginning of new things, because we have so much data essentially really in the portfolio that we have probably data to write about for years to come. So that's good about this. And I think the point as well here, it just demonstrates how important was sort of the young early career aspect of the project. And also, which comes back to what the Newton Fund was asking us, I think the idea as well of pushing the careers of young women, because especially with Mishka, Rouvet and Lorena, they were all in their very early young stage of their career. And out of the 3, we have 2 now in tenured jobs, which is really good. And I don't know about Rouvet. Could you just update us on what Rouvet is doing, Stuart?
Can I actually, Werner's just logged in now. I'm going to ask maybe Werner should actually just introduce yourself, but also maybe just get the update on Rouvet as well. As far as I know, Rouvet at the moment is kind of going between the PhD and also working in practice. Werner's got more knowledge about where she is with the PhD than I do.
Werner, sure. Is it okay just for you to say we did a sort of round table early on. So essentially, Stuart is currently looking whenever we have new people logging in, we're asking them essentially to present themselves. So if you just want to say hi, if the audio is working.
She's still connecting.
Yeah, I can see that.
Now, the video is not working, but I'm here. I'm sitting right now in the old Kronstadt council chamber with stained glass windows and beautiful carvings. It's quite amazing, having managed to get quite lost in Kronstadt thanks to Google Maps, but we're finally here.
That's great.
Is there anything else I've got to tell you?
Do you want just to say a few words about who you are?
Okay, I'm Werner Nell. I'm from the University of the Free State. I'm professor there. I'm a town planner, and I've had lots of years in practice in managing the city planning departments. I've also done land use management, local economic development and spatial planning in my career. And I'm also a council member of the South African Council for Planners and chairperson of the Education and Training Committee at present.
That's great, thank you. Stuart, before I continue, do you want to add anything?
No, I think at the end of the presentation, I'll just make 1 or 2 points, but otherwise, good at the moment, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to continue on the presentation.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, we're good. I had a sort of weird noise. Okay, I'm just going to continue. I'm just conscious of the time as well. Now I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to try to be a bit more succinct. All right, so just building upon this, I think is it? Oh, I have a weird echo, sorry. So really, when we're thinking about the SAPER project, what we achieve really is really understanding the needs and the challenges of planning practitioners in South Africa. And this really means to, in line with essentially the implications for planning education. So we did a lot of work trying to reflect on what planners learn when they are students and essentially then what they need and what they still need to learn after graduation. And one of the key things that was really crucial in our analysis is the fact that urban planning, as you probably all know, is a very scarce skill in the country. I mean, it's not as scarce as in other African countries, but still, if you compare numbers in South Africa and in, for example, in the UK, there's still very little numbers of planners. So it's really a huge, essentially, huge challenges on the head of town planners, and especially tackling really key, massive, important issues from spatial and social segregation inherited from apartheid, but also addressing a range of other challenges from housing provision, health, well-being, and formality. Again, we'll pick this up a bit later, but that's really crucial. And it just demonstrates as well the importance of the SAPER work, but also of any sort of planning research that is currently happening in South Africa. In relation to that, what we did as well is we clearly identified gaps in the training provision, post and pre-graduation, and we made a range of recommendations, and especially talking with local governments and the national governments. I mean, what could be done essentially really to address skill shortages and balanced distribution of planners between big cities, for example, in rural areas, and what means also in terms of mentorship, how mentorships and any form of support for the young planners should be addressed. And really here, we were drawing on the point that something which came very clearly from the start of the project is how essentially this lack of planners essentially leads to people being demotivated, deciding maybe either to leave South Africa or essentially to try to look for another profession. So we've been always having this in mind to try really to address this issue of planning gaps and planning skills and what it means. All right, so this I'm probably going to go quite quickly because it's available through the website, and I've been emailing you with a massive amount of papers and things to have a look at, and I thought that is essentially really of interest for you. Again, and we can either send it over or discuss it at another stage. So we actually wrote a lot, and we still have essentially a lot in the pipeline with a couple of papers also in review. But we wrote at quite an early stage of the project, and we produced outputs in various academic journals. I just put an example here. There's also a range of book chapters that have been published and also currently being written. I mean, I won't list all the conferences that we've been attending, but the idea again is what everyone from the team essentially has been able to attend conferences or try to attend conferences. We produce, and I think that's something that we're quite proud of. We produce a range of videos. I'm just going to show you what it looks like if it works. Yeah, so we produce a range of teaching videos that could be available. I'm not going to show you the videos in full, but this gives you essentially an idea of, well, it's not working. Okay, there's no sound.
One of the core tasks that planners take is to guide where development occurs in a city and in which form. In many countries, including South Africa, one of the tools used to...
So I won't show you essentially the full video now, but we produce a range of videos like this one. They're quite short, maximum 5 minutes, and they're really essentially supposed to be used as learning material. So this is one of the outputs. They're available on YouTube. So essentially they're really free of access in that respect. We and Phil produced this platform for international student collaboration, which is still on the SAPER website. We presented it at the last advisory group, so I won't say much around it again, but we can pick it up a bit later. We have the CAP Good Practice platform, which is still essentially, and Phil, I believe, has been adding the new data for the 2020 results, and we'll have the SAC plan discussion forum as well, which is still being built, and this is going to be the final big output out of the project. So this is the CAP platform with some of the latest essentially results. So again, this is something which has been done with CAP, with SAPER, and essentially the idea is every year we're building this database based on essentially the contribution CAP is receiving for their awards. This is also the SAC plan website. So in addition to the SAPER website, SAC plan per se. So for those in the UK, SAC plan is really much the equivalent of the RTPI. So they have a dedicated SAPER website where the papers have been made available. And essentially this is again, is a matter really to show the connection between SAPER and SAC plan per se. So this is probably one of the most probably complex slides of my presentation, because I'm trying to summarize what we did in more than 3 years in a couple of words. Again, we will be picking this up with colleagues afterwards. So I'm going to try to go in really very succinctly with regard to the key themes we've been tackling. And you need to bear in mind that this was all made with this idea of really contrasting what the planners learn, what they need, and essentially how we can address this. So some of the themes included, for example, the role of power relations in planning. What we demonstrated is that planners in South Africa still have power to negotiate, and essentially it's not up to the policymakers to make decisions. They have demonstrated that they can essentially go through the process and the system and essentially deliver outcomes, and we've been discussing this. We've also been discussing and looking into the detail at the success and the failure of planning reform post-apartheid. Again, I mean, South African colleagues will discuss this essentially in further details, but the idea was really to try to ponder and to critically analyze how essentially plans were not really delivered in practice, what was the challenges encountered, and essentially how this was resonating with wider issues with regard to, for example, social segregation. Development control was a very big one, and this was really pushed, especially by the South African team, really challenges essentially existing zoning policies and highlighting how this is essentially probably not the right way forward, and there's a need for more adaptability in that respect. We've been also looking a lot at the challenges for the young graduates with regards to difficulties in mentorship, difficulties in getting the right skills and the right training to be able to do their job properly. Again, we will pick this up later, so I'm just summarizing very quickly. The other thing as well we've been working on is, I mean, anything which is linked to alternative forms of planning, temporary urbanism, linked to the informality, linked to essentially how do we deal, for example, with township, with informal economy, with all essentially the activities that are crucial in South African cities per se. And in terms of the gaps in planning education, really drawing backwards to some of the key output of the project, something that came up very strongly is the fact that there's more essentially to do in order really to push the students to learn more on how to negotiate, how essentially to let them aware that they're working within different structures of power, they're working with this highly complex environment full of different temporalities and rhythm. And through this, essentially, it's a matter of being able to tackle this, to address this, and essentially to find a way around it. And this is difficult in a current sort of standard, in a way, curriculum. The other thing as well we've been arguing is how this relies with a lot of creativity and adaptability. So in other words, essentially, you can't just follow things by the rule and on basically a piece of paper. There's a need essentially to embrace the work, but be able to take decisions that are linked to the fact that the environment essentially is highly adaptable. So essentially in line to this, they need to find ways to learn about what they need to find additional training, and then adapt and deliver the job. There's a need as well to recognize much more formally the role of alternative practices and planning of regulations. And this includes in the curriculum where things were coming out of our interviews from essentially planners saying that could almost, I mean, one of the things which would be, I mean, utopic to do, but would be essentially to send every planners 1 or 2 weeks in a township every year, just for them essentially to get a sense of how those places work, because this is something they're not familiar with, even though they live in the same cities. So it's really essentially finding probably a better balance between the hard and the soft skills. And again, this is something we will pick up at a later stage. In terms of the practical contributions, so again, I mean, loads happen in those 3 years. So obviously a lot of engagement with SACPlan, but also with SAPE, with South African Local Government Association, SALGA, and of course with CAP. So we produce quite a lot of briefing notes in that respect. And also the South African team ran an event almost a year ago now. And this diagram came out of this event. And through this event, they managed to get around 50 participants, and they really reflected on what was learned from the project and really what planners essentially wish they had knew when they started the job. And in regard to this, I'm just going to show you, this is essentially the latest outcome of the SAPER project. It's not fully finished, but it's almost finished. And it's really a video which has been produced out of the South African end of project event, which aimed essentially to be made available, especially for young South African planners, building upon what we learn at the end of project event.
5 pointers for starting work as a town planner. 1, don't panic. Your first job will have a steep learning curve. Planning education only starts at university. It carries into the workplace and involves a lifetime of learning. Becoming a fully capable planner takes time. 2, build up a network of people you can approach for guidance and advice. At university, you mostly learned from reading and lectures. In the workplace, much of the knowledge you gain is from other professionals. 3, be friendly and make time to socialize with colleagues. People are more willing to help you and to forgive mistakes if they have a good relationship with you. 4, your first job does not necessarily define your career. One of the things that makes planning interesting is the diverse nature of the work, ranging from drafting plans to processing applications. Even if your first job is not a good fit, once you have some experience, you are more likely to find your niche. 5, keep learning. One of the essential qualities of being a good planner is being up to date with knowledge and skills. Make a point of attending planning events and courses, reading relevant articles and websites, and watching professional videos.
So this is a video. I mean, it's almost finished. We still need essentially the person doing it needs to add the logo and everything. But this is essentially a short, very simple video that was produced out of the event, because we were discussing this with Stuart, and still Stuart will pick this up later. But this was essentially the kind of guidance that came out of the event, things very basic, but the South African planners that who attended the event were saying that this is really what I wish I had knew before. So we're hoping that this video will actually be very useful, especially towards the younger planners who are just starting essentially their
5 pointers.
Okay. And this is essentially my last slide because I've been talking far too much. This, I mean, what I want to say here is the fact that, as it's probably already quite clear from what I was saying, I mean, we've done a lot. We have a massive amount of data, meaning that we still have a lot to write about, but also we've managed essentially to link this project with a lot of different other opportunities essentially. So we've been linking this to another project that was involved in South Africa, in East Africa, and typically in that respect, we recently connected as well this project, SAPER, with COVID-19 research, and Stuart and I with other colleagues, including Lorena, including Katrina as well. So Katrina is not part of the SAPER project, but Katrina is linked to the project because she's Stuart's wife. So again, we made some connections through that as well. And Katrina is a health professional, so she got involved essentially also through this. So we've been working on how can we build out of what we learned from the SAPER project in terms of planning capacity, especially in line with the response to COVID. And in line with this as well, I mean, Stuart and Katrina have been working on food security, for example, for another book project I'm having. So essentially, it's just to demonstrate all the kind of linear work that happened in that respect. And also, we're starting essentially developing comparison between what we know in the South African case, dealing with informality and the everyday sort of living, with the research I'm doing with another colleague in Lebanon, again, with refugees in COVID-19. So we're essentially linking this up to try to develop essentially a sort of wider understanding of this idea of delivering planning in context essentially of crises in a way. So we still have loads essentially happening with CAP and especially with the young planners in relation to their work on mentorship and also with the women in planning. So I'm following things up with Christine in January. And we're going to have a meeting planned with the new CAP president in that respect. So hopefully essentially again, there will be loads of activities coming up in link to this. So in terms of the activities still happening, essentially on sort of short scale. So we have the discussion forum and the mentoring schemes that are going to be finished pretty soon. I should probably check at the latest stage with Martin. I hope he has received the payment or he will receive it in a couple of weeks because the payment has been sent now on the UCL side. We're still presenting essentially results from the project and we have 2 papers at the online 2021 AEJ conference. So one Lauren is leading and one Stuart is leading with me and again my colleague from Lebanon. And finally, I mean, we still have loads going on in terms of publications with several papers which have been submitted and we're waiting essentially for reviews. We have a couple of book chapters happening. Stuart and I are, and again with somebody else, we're thinking about a book proposal which will go beyond SAPER, but again, we'll try to bring this idea of tackling essentially urban issues in various contexts. And the latest project we're doing is Stuart and I are putting a small bid through the UCL Global Engagement Fund, where we want essentially really to try to use SAPER as a sort of platform to engage with how planners and built environment experts can learn from crises, looking at Cape Town, which has been going through a range of crises. So not only the COVID pandemic, but also water crises, floods, fires. So it will be hopefully, if we get the money, a small scale project, again, building on SAPER, but going much wider with regard to the built environment experts and with regard to the SDGs. So that's really essentially a very sort of quick snapshot about what we've been doing. And this is really my last slide, where I just want to say this isn't really the end of the project for sure. I mean, we still have a lot going on. And as I said at the start, because there's also a strong, essentially, human relationship behind the team, I mean, we know that we'll still essentially continue to work together in a way or another. I use actually this image of the parachute thing. It was a bit of a joke with regard to COVID and the fact that instead of seeing each other, we are in front of this computer. But I think the idea is we're starting small and then we essentially got a larger team. And I think the more we work, the more we start to have more people and more opportunities essentially building in to do things. And I think it's great because it's been, I mean, clearly not only research outcomes, but there's been a range of policy outcomes and really impact outcomes per se, which really is coming from, I mean, what we like to do as academicians and as essentially practitioners is really to try to do our work. I mean, think theoretically, conceptually, but also try to deliver things that matter on the ground. So I'm going to just stop here, hand over to Stuart, just for him to add a couple of things, and then we can just continue.
I'm just going to add literally 2 points just at the end of this. I think the first and most important point is just a thanks to Lauren. You know, this project would not have been possible but for Lauren, and she's gone, to say above and beyond is an understatement in terms of making this work. Yeah, so I think from my side and probably from the wider team side, just a massive thank you for the massive amount of work that you actually put into this project and keeping it going. I think just one other point, just from my side, is also one of the big kind of outcomes of this project has been kind of a South African team meeting with the UK team. And I know for myself, and I'm hopefully speaking for South African team as a whole, you know, being exposed to the UK planning culture and the UK academic culture has certainly been a massive lesson. I'm hoping it also went the other way. And I think especially when we're talking about early career development or career development, being exposed to a different way to do things academically and practically is massive. You start to have a lot of assumptions about how you do things and think that's normal. Then you encounter a different culture. And in that different culture, you start to realize, well, maybe the things I do isn't the best way to do it. Maybe the things I can pick up, maybe the ways I can adapt. So I think for us, that's been a massive, a massive learning from our side. Yeah. So that's just my 2 points. And again, just a massive thank you to Lauren on that side.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of burning question, or if otherwise we can just hand over to Lorena. Can I just check with the group if there's anything anyone wants to ask or add? Nope. Okay. In that case, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just hand over to Lorena. I don't know if, I think Ruve hasn't been able to join. No. Okay.
Yeah, she joined and left again.
Okay. So Lorena, essentially you're talking about for everyone.
Can you see my screen and listen to me? Yes. Okay, great. So yeah, so Ruve had some issues. She won't be able to join us, and I think we had this conversation as we had the organization of the event, and then we were thinking how we're going to bring this. So we have sort of I'm just going to show. We have some headlines, and they look a lot, and there will be a lot of like keywords in a way, because it's all the thoughts we had when we were talking about, and I'll just address some of them. And I think, so we were asked to reflect a little bit on our experience and what we learned and how we move forward being early careers. And of course, there are other issues or the elements that I think that join Ruve and I, and to some extent Mishka, but we weren't able to access Mishka, so it's sort of our perspective in a way, but just to acknowledge that we did the work, the three of us, the field work, and I think it's very important. Mishka also did a very important work. So I'm just trying to like get, sorry, I'm just trying to change the view. Okay, there you go. So first we were thinking about how we got introduced to the project, right? So being early careers, we both of us in different, maybe in different stages, because I had just finished my PhD, Uwe was starting her PhD. So what story did we want to tell? And how would we begin discussing an issue or participating in a research in an issue that we had not been addressing before? We might have been experienced that to some extent, but not necessarily lived it, right? And then it was also very interesting between me and Uwe how we would start to connect, because I was about to go to South Africa. I didn't know much about the field work, and I didn't know much about the context, and I was very anxious. So it's like, how can we get together and do that? And I think it was really great that we had this very good connection from day one, and I think that's how the work sort of went really well, I would say. Then of course, coming to South Africa, so we had a Brazilian and a South African working on the topic, and of course South Africa, as everywhere, it's a very complex society, but then we have all these elements that are very particular to South Africa. So how would I be able to, as an outsider, share that and learn from the experiences? And how would also, maybe I think the point was how Ruve would also see it from the eyes of an outsider. So that sort of connection, that was very important. And I think these foreign involvements and experience versus the experience of a local, that's one thing that we were always trying to rationalize and trying to understand and see how we could take the best of it during the field work, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that afterwards. And then, of course, we were, as Lauren was saying, we were on the road for a long time together. So it was a personal experience on top of the professional one. We were very close for many times. We were sharing houses. We were planning that together. We were taking weekends off, and sort of, she was showing me all this beautiful environment South Africa has, and food and you know, like, and wines and everything. So it was also a very important personal experience, I think, from my side. So as I said, the first thing was this discussion about, so we have the local and then we have the foreign, and what information do we get being, let's say, having these different viewpoints, right? And I felt that many times, for me, the case that I was international, I was foreign, there was a lot of explanation of the intricacies of South African context, when, of course, when they were talking with Ruve, they sometimes expected she knew that already. So they would go in depth with other issues. So if we see the interviews that we have, the ones that I did, the ones that she did, I think they complement each other, because we have broader views and broader understanding of, yes, these intricacies, as I say, but we also had a lot of in-depth discussions on departing from, let's say, a point that was already like, okay, we know that, let's go to the next point. And I think that was a very interesting point. And for me, it was a learning curve as well. To first of all, it was the first time that I worked with so many interviews and such a large set of data. And also, so how, it was always a question like, how are we going to get more out of the interviews and not only get the same answers all over again? How can I develop my skills as an interviewer to get those issues? And also, how can I learn the cues? They are very cultural, right? So I had been working in the context of Brazil before, also the UK, but what were the cues to understand how to have a good interview? So maybe when people read the transcripts, there is a lot of talking also from my side, and I think that comes from my learning how to do the interviews in South Africa and my experience as doing interview in Brazil as well. And then, of course, how do we get people to trust us? How do we understand? And of course, how do we take that time to allow people to feel comfortable when talking about issues that are very complex? Sometimes they were very directly related to their everyday in the profession. So there is this issue of trust as well, right? Like they were bringing topics that were very controversial at times, and they would be talking maybe about their bosses, or they would be talking about, so how do we address that? And I think one issue that we had that was good, we had a very long interview schedule, but then we had sort of the freedom to focus more on one or another topic depending on how they felt first comfortable with the topic and how well they wanted to talk about it. And I think that was a very interesting point, especially, for example, when we looked at people working in the public sector, people working in the private sector. They had a lot to say about everything, but they also had very specific things they wanted to talk a little bit more about it. And then, of course, it comes to the point of analyzing the interviews and how we would do the coding. So I think it was a learning process for all of us as well, how to divide the information and then create like big topics that we could then bring to the larger group, and then we could discuss together what would be interesting for the whole group to have it analyzed and coded based on our first perceptions. So it was also interesting to be part of, like, be very central in the sense of gathering the data and then learning how to make sense of it beyond. And then, of course, yeah, so it's also, how do you show that interest in the interviews was also one thing that we were talking about. Of course, interviewees, they well, some interviews they were more successful than others, and I think that's also part of how we engage in the conversation itself, how we make the first contact. And I have to say, Ruve was amazing at that, because she really knew how to get access to people, and she was very persistent. When we wanted to interview someone, she made sure that we really interview that person. And I think that that's a very important work, to have someone also that understands that process and knows how to push the right buttons without being necessarily rude or creating any sort of discomfort. So that was, I think, very essential. And another issue that was brought was about technology. So, for example, we felt the telephonic interviews we had, they ended up giving us a bit less, unless, of course, we already knew the people, they were very outspoken. So we have very good telephonic interviews, but there is a little issue. I think that the face-to-face contact was much more successful. And also the issue that when I was saying that Ruve and we were on the road for a long time, and we were actually families on the road. So it was also very important, first for us to get this face-to-face, but also for me to get a context and try to understand the richness of South Africa. And I know it was only 4 months, and I know there is a limitation to that, but it's still much more in depth than I would have expected before. So it was really important, and we could really connect, or at least it could give me a picture of some of the issues people were bringing in their own context, right? And then we went like from Cape Town, where we started there for, and I stayed there for 2 weeks. And then we moved to Bloemfontein, where I was based most of the times, and then we traveled everywhere. So there was a beautiful shifting landscape, and also in challenges, right? So it was also really interesting to see how the challenges, they were portrayed differently according to who we interviewed. And then, of course, there is also, it was a strange, I felt this is strange, I forgot the word now in English, but I felt comfortable at the same time with the South African context. I know it's a lot of differences, but there is also a lot of commonalities. And it was shocking for me to see, as an outsider, some elements that maybe I've naturalized in the Brazilian context. And how could I draw from my experiences as a Brazilian planner and researcher into the context of South Africa. And also, I think that we had very interesting engagements, Ruve and I, discussing that during our work together. Then just maybe making some quick words about, of course, after the field work, what makes and out of it. And I think that then we have a little bit of different experiences here. I'm not going to speak for Ruve, but she was also talking about her PhD. And then, of course, it gets a very solo nature. And sometimes it feels isolating when we're working on the topics. And even me, sometimes when I was dealing with the data and trying to make sense of it, of course, it's like I felt overwhelmed. And then I would come and discuss, Lauren, Stuart, should we have a look at that, and with the other colleagues as well. But there is that sense of responsibility. Am I missing something? And how am I working on that? So I think that's one of the challenges in academia, right? When we have to sort of retreat and learn how to work by ourselves as well. I'm going to pass this one, because she was going to talk more about that one. And then she made this presentation. I thought it was very sweet, because this was the first time we met when we arrived in Cape Town. So she picked us up, and that, I think that's also bringing, and I think it was her intention, bringing the little bit of course, it was a personal journey, maybe even more than an academic one, because for me, 4 months in South Africa changed not only the way I see I see research, but also the ways that, like, my personal own perspective. So yeah, and then there was also the fact that we were 3 women doing the field work. So this is an issue that we even thought about maybe writing about it at some point. We didn't manage to get to that. but it is a very interesting approach, or it's a very interesting point. And of course, it's a much broader than just doing research in South Africa, but it also brings to some of the challenges that we have as being females, sometimes dealing with, let's say, more patriarchal society, or views that we were maybe too young. So how do we deal with these issues in the field? But this, I don't think we have too much to say about it. It's just more that something that we keep like thinking over and over, and maybe it's something that I'm experiencing even now in my career, like how to be a female in academia, right? And one important thing, I think it's the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt that we have to deal all the time, like is this idea that are my successes, and how I'm going to make them mine, how I'm going to own them. And this is, I think, an important issue that we kept discussing. And of course, I think it's very tied to being also an early career, and being an early career working in different contexts, and also trying to fit in and to learn, again, the cultures of the places. So for me, of course, when I moved to Birmingham, I was already in Plymouth, so I had a little bit more, I was a bit more aware of the British context, but again, I had a different set of rules and responsibilities and how to address that. And Ruve, on the other hand, of course, she had also, on top of that, she was doing her PhD. So she was in that process of also making up her own research and trying to understand her own interests. And that's where issues like of mentorship, they come into play, like how the role that especially the PIs, Lauren and Stuart, I think they had a very big role. And I know all the people as well. I'm super in that with all my colleagues, because I thought it was a very big learning curve, having the opportunity to work with all of you who are much more experienced than we are, and have a different, or a different view of career, sometimes also like more more focused. So it's also good for us to see that and to sort of foresee future. Our achievements then, it's of course, I think it, for me, it was a deep understanding of South African planning. And of course, I think for Ruve as well, the international exposure, as I said, even my job right now, I think it's really closely related to the achievements that were collectively done in the group, and the opportunity I had to research planning education and say, you know, like I have experience on that. And I think that's a useful skill for me as a addition, let's say, to the team. The importance of networking and getting to know more people, and as Lauren's saying, that's it would be a great opportunity to continue working with all you amazing people. And of course, the fun of traveling and to doing work to be like 4 months, just investing in that part of the research was something that was very amazing. And just some points that when we look back, we could have done different, maybe. Like, so we felt that the fact that we didn't have the time and to go to KwaZulu-Natal and Limpopo, we did interviews there, so they were telephonic, but of course it would have been, I think, more or richer if we had the opportunity to go there. Also, we didn't work with traditional authorities, so that's a question whether that should have been done or not, because of course that's a very, that's another whole set of research. But it's important to mention that we did not have the opportunity to interview them. Ruve was also mentioning that she would love to have more interaction in the writing process. And I think that's a learning, right? It's a learning. I'm still struggling on writing. Laura knows that. And how it is, of course, learning a different set of skills. Yeah, and then also thinking about when we think about the issue of planning education and the Black South Africans, how can we also understand, especially me, bringing now my own personal point, being a white Brazilian, where is my place to understand that, and how can I understand that? Yeah, and I think it's been a great and amazing journey for us, and I think it set my future in a way. And looking in retrospective, of course, I was not I did not see that so much ahead in the future, but I'm really indebted to the project and getting to know people. And I think that has also shaped the way, as Stuart was saying, like working with different ways of doing research and learning skills as well in that point. So not only as a personal journey, but also as a professional experience was an amazing experience. Thank you. I'm sorry, maybe I spoke too much, but.
Thank you very much, Lorena. I'm just conscious that I've been talking too much also. So what we're thinking is maybe just doing a very short sort of 3-4 minutes break, just to allow, if anyone wants, yeah, just get out of the screen and have a few steps. We can do that and stretched. And then we'll get back essentially to Phil and to David's presentation, and then we'll take time for discussion. We want to keep quite a lot of time for the South African side as well. So I think we need to be cautious of time as well. No pressure on Phil and David, because I don't want also just to cut what you need to say, but we'll do that. Okay, so I mean, it's 15. If we can just start again at 10:55 at the latest. So just have a cup of tea, quick steps, and we're back.